What the hell actually happened there? Because this is a kind of a unique thing. Because we were just talking about conservatives running away scared from trans people that they've been demonizing for the last, year and a half, right? And it looks like finally a trans person has actually done something murderous for the first time that I'm aware of. I don't know if anybody else has any other examples of a transgendered mass shooter, but I've never heard of a transgendered mass shooter before. So I admit I was very surprised when I heard that the shooter in the Nashville mass shooting was a trans man, right? So what exactly happened there? This occurred in Nashville at a Covenant school, right? Which is like a it was like a religious private school, and apparently this person that went there was an ex-student. His name is Aiden Elizabeth Hale, right? Who is a female to male trans person. It looked like from the LinkedIn profile that I'm seeing on the news that Aiden was still going by the birth name Audrey, and as in he hadn't updated his LinkedIn profile yet. Still a little sketchy about what's going on with this person, right? I saw some sources saying that they just recently transitioned. Like he still had long hair, for example, but was dressing in like shirts and ties and things, so was not presenting as a woman anymore. So that's it's still a little sketchy as to what exactly the story is. Like did they just recently transition? Were they doing it for a while? Who really knows, right? And here's the thing about that. It's like we don't want to assume anything, right? Especially when it comes to this. So this is sort of a new phenomenon. There really hasn't been a trans shooter like just having just having like female shooters is extremely rare. And the fact that there's a female to male trans person, or an FTM trans person, is like who's also a mass shooter is like one in a million, right? Like I don't think there's any other, like I said before, I don't think there's any other example of that I've ever heard of. Now, here's the thing about it, right? What exactly happened? Well, so this person, Hale, shot a side door entrance to the school, rushed in, and was armed with two pistols and a long gun rifle, right? Which was apparently not an AR-15, but something similar. So basically, it wasn't like an assault rifle, but it was a long gun, right? Semi-automatic long gun, according to what I saw on the news. But remember the reports are still rather fresh. This only happened yesterday, and went around and murdered three children and three faculty members. Apparently, the police learned their lesson after what happened in Uvalde last year because they were there immediately. They didn't stand around like they did in Uvalde, Texas. They actually went inside, and within 13 minutes of the beginning of the assault, this person, Hale, was dead. Right? So, cops did not mess around this time, which is good for them, commendable. I mean, good. Get in there, stop the shit from happening, kill the shooter. They did their job, right? Which kind of shows it's like, yeah, well, they could have done they could have done their job last time. And I mean, I know this isn't like the same state or anything, but kind of shows how like incompetent the Uvalde police department was. Like, these guys are like showing you how to do it right and shit, right? Um, Apparently, this person Hale had a manifesto and detailed maps and was planning on murdering a lot more people. And this is where it becomes somewhat controversial here, right? Because I want to show, I mean, first off, all right, we have to talk about the obvious, right? Why did this happen? Did this happen because the school was a gun-free zone? Did this happen because, there wasn't an armed police? Because apparently there wasn't security or an armed police officer on the campus, right? This was a small sort of Christian private school, so they didn't have like campus police, anything like that, right? Did this happen because of any of that stuff? You know, no, no. It happened because a crazy person got a hold of some guns and wanted to kill people. That's what happened, right? So, however, which way you want to strike this, whatever kind of security things that you think we could do. The fact is, if this person Hale, Aiden Hale, or if they did not have access to these weapons, then those three kids and those three teachers would be alive, right? And that's true regardless of whatever mass shooter there is, whatever event there is, right? This is true with the grocery store shooter guy, the guy that went and drove 20 miles to kill a bunch of black people at a Buffalo supermarket. Remember that dude? This is true for Elliot Rodger. This is true for, what's his name? The fucking Dylan Roof, the guy that blew a bunch of people away in a church, right? This is true for all of them. If these guys didn't have their guns, this wouldn't have happened, right? Because the simple fact is that, if this person Hale here, right, Mr. Hale here, if they would have broke into the school with a butcher knife and ran around and tried to like chop people up, there'd be far less fatalities. There may not have been any fatalities at all, right? Because you can't break into a school and murder 22 people with a butcher knife before somebody stops you. That's right, especially if the cops are going to be there in 13 minutes, right? They would have, yeah, a teacher with a baseball bat would have just took care of that shit, right? That's just a simple fact. But the other fact is that, well, we live in a country where it's written into the Constitution that people are allowed to buy these lethal weapons, and that's what they are. They're lethal weapons. And our culture has somehow convinced itself that this is the most important fucking thing in the world, is the ability to own these lethal weapons, right? Now, here's the thing, folks. I talk a lot of shit about the Second Amendment, but I don't want it to go away, obviously, right? Because you have a right to own these things. This is your right. It says so right there, and I think people should be allowed to own them. You should be allowed, and I will even capitulate and say you should be allowed to own things like AR-15s as well, right? You should be allowed to own them. Responsible gun owners are allowed to own these types of weapons, right? Gaped Crusader. Shooter used the normal pistol with extended mag brace length barrel. Weapon configuration with screams. The ATF bought this for me. I can tell you that if it's still if it was still an Ownman, he would not have gotten nearly this many kills. Women suck at mass shooters in general. Well, that's the thing, Gaped Crusader. So apparently, over the last nearly 20 years, about 17 years, there's only been 4 confirmed mass shooters, which were not male, which were not born male. So like including women and trans men, right? Only 4 of them. Like all of the other ones have been men. Born men, right? Like biological men, So it's like, yeah, if there's one thing in this world that men are better at than women, it's murdering lots of people at a short, with a gun. That's true. So, Gaped Crusader, I think you should be able to own anti-tank missiles and heavy machine guns. Well, I don't know. I think I draw the line there. But I do agree you should be allowed to own weapons. You should be allowed to own guns. I mean, yeah, maybe not anti-tank missiles. I think that's a little much, right? Because the Constitution doesn't say Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of owning an anti-tank missile. It doesn't say that. It says arms, right? You know, it's the Second Amendment specifically just says arms. It doesn't say what those arms are, right? So I think reasonable expectations would say, okay, you're not allowed to own military grade shit, right? That's reasonable. I think most people would agree that you shouldn't be allowed to own stuff that the military has, right? Um, I also think most people would agree that you should be able to own something like an AR-15 because it can be used for home defense. It's not a machine gun. You know, um, it's a long rifle. You can use it for hunting if you want, and then also home defense, the same way that any kind of gun is, right? And if there's certain features that it doesn't have, it's not a fully automatic whatever, and if you don't have say for example a magazine that has 100 rounds in it, something like that. That has actually been something to prove that's been proved to like reduce the number of casualties as well. Keeping the magazine short so that they can't just like a crazy person can't go into a school and kill 17 children at once. He's got to reload a few times, right? I mean, but you get what I'm saying. There should be reasonable restrictions. I believe I think that's perfectly acceptable. Reasonable restrictions. And it's like the debate should be what are those reasonable restrictions, right? Well, things like getting a background check, making sure a person's not a wanted felon before they buy a gun, you know, um, stuff like that, right? And I see nothing wrong with requiring, like waiting periods, stuff like that, criminal background checks. I would even say, like, I read a thing once about smart guns, like selling, it would be a gun that would use your fingerprint or something like that, so only you were allowed to fire it. I mean, what's wrong with that? I think that would be awesome. I think that would solve a lot of these problems, wouldn't it? It would solve the problem of a teenage kid going in and stealing his father's gun and then going to school and murdering, 27 kids with it, right? If it was a smart gun, if it was a gun that wouldn't fire unless it was like, you had like, if you were, like, you had to unlock it with like a code or something or a key or, a fingerprint, something like that. That's perfect. Let's do it. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, because that wouldn't prevent people from owning guns, right? It would prevent people from stealing them, right? Isn't that? I mean, what's wrong with that? Or I would even say like saying like you have to take a gun safety course before you can own a gun. What's wrong with that? I mean, you have to take a driver's license course like before you can get a driver's license. You have to like you have to pass driver's ed, right? So how come I mean, the trouble comes with that word right. It's a right. So you don't have a right to drive a car, but you have a right to own a gun. You know what I mean? So there has to be some kind of solution, though, because we keep seeing this same shit happening over and over and over. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's time we really have this discussion. We really need to have a discussion saying, well, how the fuck do you stop mass shootings? Right? How do you stop? Let's just take one type of mass shooting. Let's just take mass shootings in schools, right? Because let's not even talk about mass shootings at movie theaters or concerts or grocery stores or churches or wherever. All the other fucking places where we have mass shootings. Because mass shooting can fucking happen anywhere, right? Can happen anywhere in the entire country, in any town, at any time. Every time you go outside in this country, you can potentially be in danger of getting blown away by some disgruntled maniac incel freak who like, you know, who's like a fucking, I don't know, totally insane person who's been like, fucking radicalized by Nazis and shit on the internet or whatever, and convinced to go fucking hero himself in front of like, I don't know, so that people subscribe to PewDiePie or some shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, like that could happen like at any time. So how the fuck do you stop it? Right? I mean, What are your alternatives? Have armed guards everywhere, have every person in the goddamn world carry a gun? That's a fucking stupid idea. You don't want every person to have a gun, right? You know why? Because people will start blowing each other away for dumbass reasons, because that's what happens when everyone has a gun. That's why in Texas, for example, there's like way more shootings like and way more fatalities from firearms than there are like pretty much anywhere else in the country, like per capita. I think Chicago might be the only place, like, Michigan, right? That might be the only place that has like a higher per capita gun violence than like Texas. It's kind of, you know what I mean? But why? Because everybody's armed there. Because people are like just walking down the street with like pistols on their hips, going to the grocery store to like buy vegetables and stuff, armed and shit. It's like, you know, I mean, if you don't think that's a problem, let me give you a scenario. And I've said something like this in a prior stream, but I think it's a good example, so I'm going to say it again, right? Imagine you are out on the street, right? And you park your car, and a guy parks next to you, and then when he gets out, he bangs his car door into your car, like really hard, puts a big ass dent in it, right? What would you do? Your first instinct is to jump out of your car and yell at that guy. That's your first instinct. Say, hey man, what the hell did you do to my car? You're paying for this, right? Possibly throw down if the dude gives you any crap, right? This is what every red-blooded American male will do if somebody fucks with their car like that, right? Now imagine you do that, you jump out of your car ready to kick some ass, and you look and the guy has a pistol just you know, on his hip, right? Now what do? Right? Do you go over there and start giving that guy shit for fucking your car up? Or do you just forget it happened? Right? If you're smart, you forget it happened. Why? Now, here's the thing. Your rational mind would say, well, hey, I'm no danger to this guy. Why would he shoot me? But in real life, you know this person can kill you. You're not going to mess with them, right? Right? Because people shoot each other for over stupid shit all the time in this country. This is what it is. People blow themselves away and blow away other people for the dumbest fucking reasons on earth. Right? And the more likely you are to have that gun on you or around you, the more likely you are to be shot. Not by, you know, by your own weapon sometimes, right? Or by somebody else, right? Because having that weapon makes the person who has it kind of makes them feel like they're in charge. And they're more likely to assert themselves, right? And be aggressive because they have an advantage. This is why you see in Texas more people die in Texas than anywhere else in the country when it comes to firearms, right? Per capita. That's why. That's why, because people are walking around with guns all the time, right? What's the first thing you do at night when you hear like some noise and you're like, you're sleeping and you hear like some knocking or loud noises or something? What do? You reach for a weapon. That's the first thing you do, right? Why? Because you might have to fight for your life right there. Someone might be breaking in your house, right? Well, do you need to do that when you're arguing with someone over a parking space or because somebody scratched your car by accident? You know. See what I'm talking about? Right? So that's why, no, not everybody should have guns. And then the other reason why everybody should not have guns, right, is because most people don't have the training involved in order to be that good person with a gun. You know, what do conservatives always tell you, right? You need a good guy with a gun to stop a bad guy with a gun, right? Well, most normal, ordinary people can't be the good guy with the gun because they don't know what the hell they're doing, right? And so you end up seeing things like, oh, well, someone will shoplift and a person will shoot them. Why? Because they were a villain. They were a criminal. They were shoplifting. Well, shoplifting, yeah, it's wrong, but that's not something that you get the death penalty for, right? See, most normal people, or they'll shoot after someone who's escaping or whatever. It's like normal people are not police. Even the fucking police most of the time don't have the time or training in order to do, you know, in order to dish out the appropriate amount of force. Most of the time, the police default to lethal force. You know what I mean? Like, they beat the shit out of you or kill you, right? If you know what I mean? That's what the cops, even the cops, the people who have the training, right? Most of the time, fuck that up. At the very least, will be extremely violent and shit, right? When they don't need to be. So how do you, if you can't even trust a cop to make the right decision when it comes to lethal force, then how are you going to trust John Q. Citizen, who's like scared shitless, thinking that everywhere he goes, there's going to be gang members all over the place and stuff? It's like, no, no. I trust myself with a gun. I trust my friend or like my father or something. But do I trust random fucking wackaloons walking down the street? Like, no, fuck no. I don't trust them at all. So it's like, that's why it's not good for society for everybody to be armed at all times, ready to dish out lethal violence, like at the drop of a fucking hat. Because when you do that, people start blowing each other away for really dumbass shit, for skipping in line at the grocery store, for fucking like, buying the last fucking, buying the last fucking banana or something, right? When they wanted that, or they start, ripping each other off for PlayStation 5s, or you know what I mean? Like, that's what'll happen if everybody has guns. They'll start shooting each other over dumbass arguments. Because that's exactly the kind of thing you find in Texas, right? That's exactly what happens. I remember once there was a story that I should have saved it. It was the most ridiculous thing I ever read, and it was about two rival biker gangs in Texas who met up at a restaurant, or it was like a bar and grill apparently, or something like that, in order to have like a peace conference. It was like two biker gangs, and they ended up getting in a shootout, and since everybody had guns, something like 50 people ended up getting shot. This happened like I think in around 2011. It was fucking crazy. It's like something out of a movie. 50 people shot in giant fucking shootout, right, in Texas. Like, anyway, so that's the first angle of all this, right? Second thing I'm seeing here is a very, very large amount of anti-trans bigotry jumping out all over the place, Seeing it basically on the shadier parts of the internet, places like, the shadier parts of Reddit or Kiwi Farms, stuff like that, right? Seems like the anti-trans people are sort of jumping for joy when the news came out that Aiden Elizabeth Hale was, Aiden Hale was a trans man, female to male trans person. It was sort of like, you ever seen that movie? What was that? The first Pirates of the Caribbean movie, right? So in that movie, there's a part where Jack Sparrow and Elizabeth Swann get marooned, and they're on an island, and this is the part where Barbossa makes Jack walk the plank, throws his pistol overboard, and he says, you'll be a gentleman, you'll shoot the lady and starve to death, or something like that, right? And while they're on this island, Jack Sparrow opens up a sort of smuggler's like thing, and there's all this rum, and they just get drunk, right? And then the next day, Elizabeth Swann burns all of the rum and makes this giant like bonfire, and says that, like, now we've got a bonfire a mile high, and every ship in the Caribbean is going to be looking for us. And so Jack Sparrow's walking away all pissed off, saying, she burnt all the rum, and it'll never work. And then he turns around, and there's a ship that saw the signal fire. And there's this one line there that really applies here. Jack Sparrow turns around, sees the ship, and he says, "Now there'll be no living with her." Right? That's the line Jack Sparrow gives. Now there'll be no living with her, right? That's kind of what's going on right now with the anti-trans people. They're sort of really, really giddy and happy and rubbing it in at the fact that this man was a trans man who, was the perpetrator of this crime here. Right. Not seeing a lot of compassion for the children or the victims, but here's what's going on, right? Such people really kind of don't care about the children or the victims. They're just using this as another sort of victory in the culture war, another notch in the belt, another way that they can spread around hate. And now they have the angle that trans people are bloody murderers who will murder your children, and they will point to Aiden Hale for this, right? As this example. So now we're going to see for months and months and years, every time there's a mass shooting, right? They're going to try to spin that person as a trans person. That's one thing that'll happen. The other thing is that Aiden Hale's going to be quickly going to be turned into a meme. I guarantee it. If it hasn't already happened. I mean, the shooting was, 24 hours ago? So there's most likely a meme out there of Aiden Hale. Other things you got to look out for is misinformation. So here's one thing that I found. Let me just pull it up real quick. Hang on, my internet is running slow. Hope it's not too slow. Gaped Crusader, I trust random Texans more than I trust the police. Have you ever met the police? Yes, I have, and I do not trust the police at all. But I also don't trust random people. And I don't mean just people in Texas. I mean every people. Every people everywhere. I simply do not trust them. Sorry. I would much rather trust a cop with a gun, though. When it came to an emergency situation, like let's say that there was someone who was robbing a store and he had a gun, right? I would much rather there be a police officer who took him on rather than a little old lady or like a school teacher or a garbage man or just like some random fucking wacko who even knows. Because that's the thing. It's like people panic, right? So how do you know that, first off, how do you know they're going to shoot the right person? If you're just some random dude, you might see a guy and not even know that he's the shooter, or you might shoot someone who's not the shooter. What if let's say you're in a grocery store, like that one Buffalo shooter, whatever his name, like that guy went 200 miles he drove 200 miles to a grocery store just so he could shoot black people, right? Well, imagine you're in that grocery store, a bunch of shots go off. Now imagine that there are 3 other people in the store who are armed, and they all decide they're going to be the hero. They're going to be the good person with a gun. And they go out, they pull out their guns, and they're going to go kill the shooter. Well, how do they know who's the actual shooter? What's to keep them from shooting each other? Because all you know is there's a person with a gun. There's a maniac in the store shooting people. How do you know you don't shoot the wrong guy? What if the person let's say you sneak up behind him and you blow him away? Turns out that's another person who's also armed, who's trying to stop the maniac. You know what I mean? Like, not a good thing. I would much rather have a cop who's trained. At least then he might be able to see, like, okay, that's the right guy that we have to kill, that I have to shoot, or this guy over here is a civilian, or maybe, here's, like, how do you trust a normal person to, like, not start panicking and just blowing away everyone in sight, or shooting someone and then, let's say there's somebody behind him. Let's say that the guy's running, right, and there's a crowd of people behind him, and a normal person doesn't have the training. They just start fucking blasting away. And then people get caught in the crossfire. It's like, no, it's bad news all around. I mean, if we required everyone to take the same kind of training that police get, then maybe that kind of shit wouldn't happen. But this is what happens when people try to take the law into their own hands. They shoot the wrong person. People get caught in the crossfire. You know, they panic. They end up getting shot by police themselves because the police show up. Cops show up and there's four people with guns in the grocery store fucking shooting at each other. They don't know who the actual perpetrator is. They'll kill everyone. So it's bad news. I don't think it's good that you shouldn't you should never try to take the law into your own hands ever. Like the only time you should ever try to do that is if someone is like getting murdered, and then you should try to restrain somebody. Like you should never take a lethal force into your own hand unless it's like the absolute last resort. Like, and it should be the last, and that's how the law is in most places in this country. In most places in this country, you're only allowed to use lethal force if it's the last resort. I know there's exceptions to that, like in Florida, for example, But in California, I don't know, probably in Texas too. I'd have to look up the law there. You're not allowed to just like blow somebody away the moment they start fucking with you. It should be the absolute, like, you have no choice, and then you use lethal force. That's how it should be, right? It shouldn't be you just start pulling out your gun and blowing and shooting someone who you think is the perpetrator. It's like, well, no, just because you fucking thought it was him doesn't mean, you know what I mean? Like, not a good idea. So anyway, I do want to show you guys one thing here. Was just talking about let me just arrange some things here, and because I want to show you something I found on Reddit. Let me turn on my laptop window and unlock that. Here's a thing I found on Reddit that you can check out yourself. I'll put it down in the chat if anybody there wants to see it. All of my 2 viewers right now want to see it. But this is stuff you got to look out for, because I was just talking about, Mr. Hale here becoming a meme. You're already seeing stuff like this, right? So Mr. Hale, the shooter, the trans female to male trans person who murdered 3 children and 3 adults, wrote a manifesto apparently. Well, that manifesto has not been released. But that didn't stop people from trying to fake it. So this is a thing I saw here. Let's see, can I make this bigger? Let's see if I can zoom in on that. Here's the thing. It is a fake manifesto. This is obviously fake handwriting. If you look at it, it's not actually real handwriting. This has like been typed onto here, right? If you look, it's like whoever it was typed this on here and then used Photoshop to like make it, because if you look, it's like, look at the G's, for example, right here. Like, see that G and then this G right here, like, and that G right there. Notice how they're all exactly the exact same G, right? There's like no, or look at this S right here where it says this and then is and then understand. See the S? It's all the exact same S. It's because this is fake. That's how you can tell it's fake. That's how you can tell somebody didn't actually write this. It's not an actual piece of paper that's been scanned in. So this has been less than 24 hours and you're seeing shit like this already, right? Because anti-trans people are taking advantage of this. The fucking, bigots. The bigots and the fucking MAGA chuds and shit are already taking advantage of this in order to spread hate, right? Because it's the perfect opportunity for them, because every other time there's been a mass shooting, it's always been some kind of crazy right-wing Nazi incel type. And now it's like, oh, well, we finally got one that's a trans person. So first off, here's the first thing. Since they're a trans person, that must mean automatically that they're a leftist. That's the first thing that you get, right? Because it's not like every, it must, that's just an assumption. Obviously they're a leftist if they're a trans person. It's not like there hasn't been, any other trans person on the face of the earth who hasn't been a raging leftist commie. Right. So that's what you're seeing now. Now they're kind of spinning that to say all all leftists are murderers and all trans people are murderers. Secondly, you're seeing shit like this, and this is being spread around Facebook and stuff like that, right? Trying to say, you can kind of read this for yourself. Was the attack anti-religion in origin? Bro, no, the attack was not an attack on religion. It was self-defense, like the name of trans rights, blah blah blah. You know, and if you look, this is obviously bullshit that someone created in order to spread fear. But here's the thing, right? People don't, when you see shit on Facebook, right? Like most people who get their news from Facebook, like they don't research that shit. Let's turn this fucking ridiculous shit off. Let me get rid of that. Most people who get their news from Facebook, they don't research what they see on Facebook. They don't verify anything, right? They just look at the headline and then immediately draw their own conclusions, right? So basically, someone's going to get that on Facebook, assume it's real, start reading it, and see all the ridiculous shit that's in there. I put the link so you can read it for yourself, right? And it's just a way of spreading hate, and it's really despicable because it's on the backs of dead people. A mentally disturbed person, went out, got a gun, blew a bunch of people away, and now other people are using that event. They're using the murders that this mentally ill person, perpetrated in order to continue spreading hate, right? I mean, I'm not going to make any assumptions at all about this shooter. I'm not going to try to ascribe any motive, whatever, you know. But I can say that trying to, immediately politicize this, the minute I heard that this was a trans person that was responsible, immediately I was like, okay, the shit's on now. Now we're going to see, like, it's going to be immediately politicized. And it was. It was, And that's the real tragedy, is that we can't we'll never do anything about mass shootings. When we politicize mass shootings, when we use them as tools in a culture war, we will never do anything about it, because that's the real tragedy, is that the victims of the mass shooting get quickly forgotten. And it becomes not about the victims and these poor children that were murdered when they should, in a place where they should be safe. Like, it becomes not about them, and it becomes more about both sides of a culture war utilizing this event in order to gain brownie points for their side. Right? That's what it ends up becoming, And that's the real shitty thing. It's like these poor children, you should be able to go to school and not have to worry about getting blown away. Right? I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was in school, I grew up in the 80s and, early 90s when I was in school, right? This was not a thing that happened back then, The first time I ever remember there being a mass shooting was Columbine. And that was like a major big deal, And yes, mass shootings had happened before Columbine. I mean, they were, but they didn't seem to happen every fucking week like they do now. And there were even school shootings before Columbine, but I think that was the first large one that had like a really huge body count. I mean, there were you would hear about it once in a while. Kid brings a gun to school, shoots somebody, right? But that was a really huge one, and it was like, all over the news for weeks on end. Like, the thing is, a mass shooting happens nowadays, and it's gone the next day. Like, sometimes you get more than one a week, and then you forget, by the time the week's over. There's like so many of them that it's hard to keep track of, and you can't remember. We all remember what Columbine was, though, don't we? Right? Because it was the first one. Because it was special. Because it's like that shit had never happened before, and it's sort of ingrained itself on the American consciousness. It's worked its way into our culture, right? Not so much anymore. It's become mundane now, right? part of the reason why it's mundane is because instead of actually doing anything to stop it, we've gotten into this habit of politicizing the perpetrators of mass shootings and not the shootings themselves, right? Hang on, let me just go back to my thing here. So, let's see. Gaped Crusader. Nice font choice. Can't read that thing. Yeah. This is not the first trans shooter. Did we forget about Randy Staircase? Randy Staircase. Never heard of him. Who the hell is Randy Staircase? Well, that's a new one for me, so. Randy Staircase. When did this happen? 2017? Never heard of him. I don't know. I'll have to look him up. But Andrew Blaze, Fork American YouTuber, animator. I guess I will have to look up the case of Randy Staircase. I had no idea who that was. Or 24-year-old Randy Stair brought 2 pistol grip shotguns to work at the Wees Market in rural Tukenancock. What the fuck? This was a trans person? I don't know. Randy Stair. Does Randy Stair look like a trans person? I'm looking at pictures of him. I don't know. I'll have to investigate there. Kind of just looks like a normal. I mean, maybe is it a female to male trans man? Because if so, then they present, pretty effectively. I don't know. I will look up. Thank you though. Thank you for that. I will look up Randy Stair. Yeah, Randy Stair. Okay, that's what it is. I will look up Randy Stair because that's interesting. In regards to that scene in Pirates, alcohol does not produce smoke when burned, and thus would have added nothing to the fire. Signal value, thus it was a waste of rum. So Jack Sparrow was right about that, huh? Yeah. Anyway, so there is one thing I want to go over here. It seemed rather this massacre seemed rather convenient because right before this, it seemed like we saw the beginnings of a discussion about trans people and the trans movement in general arming themselves, right? So what's going on with this, right? Well, there's lots of reports of anti-trans protesters, people like Proud Boys and 3%ers and Oath Keepers, and another group is called Patriot Front. These types of sort of brown shirt assholes showing up at things like drag shows and drag time story hours and that kind of thing, and harassing people, getting into fights, stuff like that, right? And there's lots of reports of these people showing up armed. And so one thing that we've seen over the last couple of days, I would say probably not even last week, just it was like a couple of news stories that I saw having to deal with LGBTQ people basically arming themselves and preparing for this, right? In order to meet these types of brown shirt assholes on equal footing. And, here's the thing about that, right? I think it is a good idea for members of the LGBTQ community to embrace the Second Amendment. I think that is a great idea. First reason why I think it's great is because, maybe people will stop going to gay nightclubs and murdering 50 people if they thought there would be people there with guns to fight back, right? If there were armed guards at such places. If, maybe random fucking assholes like Proud Boys and stuff will stop showing up to beat the shit out of gay people and trans people if they had a little bit of fear that the trans people may, be armed, right? Maybe it'll stop some of that violence. Maybe there'll be a little bit of mutually assured destruction, and you won't see things like, for example, guys at, say, for example, Charlottesville. You know, that's a very, very famous example of right wing violence, right? Charlottesville. So the thing is, Heather Heyer was not the only victim at Charlottesville. Heather Heyer is the woman who was ran over, and killed, the one fatality in Charlottesville, right? She was not the only victim. The whole night before and the whole night after, there were multiple people who were beaten, put in the hospital. Most of these people, their perpetrators have not been caught. There's a real famous case of a guy who was in a, I can't, his name escapes me at the moment, but a guy who was basically had the shit kicked out of him while he was in a parking garage. You know, like a 22-year-old dude, just like black dude who was just minding his own business, wasn't even part of the counter protest, nothing like that. Just some guy that parked there and was getting in his car, and described a bunch of basically white supremacists came up, just beat the living crap out of him and put him in the hospital. And by 6 dudes, and 2 of them have not been caught. 6 of his assailants were caught. 2 of them are still out there, got away with it scot-free, right? So it's not like that shit doesn't happen all the fucking time, because it does, all right? These are, insane white supremacist douchebags who, violence is a second language to these people. So, yeah, I encourage LGBTQ people to embrace the Second Amendment. You should embrace it. Because, the white supremacists embrace it. The Proud Boys fucking embrace it. Right? They're going to show up armed. So you should show up armed too. Okay? And maybe there'll be a little bit of deterrence. Maybe they won't, they won't decide to get violent if they think some bullets are going to start flying their way the next time they show up at a drag show. So that's the first thing. Maybe a fucking insane person won't go to a nightclub, and try to fucking murder people, right? If he thinks that he's gonna get blown away the minute he walks in the door. So that's the first thing, right? Second reason why I think they should embrace it, and this is more of a sort of practical, from a political sort of like political strategy standpoint. I think the LGBTQ community should embrace the Second Amendment because it disarms a very popular attack when it comes to leftists, right? Very, very popular attack among the right wing is that all leftists want to take away your guns, right? And the fact is that's simply not true. It's not true, There is a segment of the left, obviously, who believes in gun control, right? I myself believe in gun control, but that doesn't mean I want to take away everybody's guns. That doesn't mean I want to outlaw guns at all. No, I don't want to outlaw them. I just think that there should be extra steps before you can get one. There's the same way that there's extra steps where you can't just jump into a car and drive away. You have to have a driver's license, right? So I see nothing wrong with requiring a license, for example, a permit to own a weapon, and to have to take a test and pass a test, a safety course, stuff like that. I see nothing wrong with you having to register your gun, for example. Like, what's wrong with registering a gun? I mean, the police would like it. If the police know, like, let's say, for example, the police get a call to go to a house, and if they look up the gun registry, okay, well, this guy doesn't own any guns. I mean, yes, they'll still be careful, right? But let's say that they look on the gun registry and they see, well, this guy owns like a shotgun or a pistol or an AR-15 or something, right? Then they'll know to be extra careful, right? And they won't just show up and they know that this guy might be dangerous and they might have to send more people and they might have to, they might have a potential hostage situation or some shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, pretty sure the cops will like that. it'll probably save a lot of lives, right? They may be less likely to go barging inside and blowing everyone away if they know there's a gun in there. They might pull up and try to, like, negotiate, right? Because what do they do now? What the cops assume everyone has one. They shoot first, they ask questions later, and then you get people like for example, Breonna Taylor. The whole thing with Breonna Taylor was that she was asleep, and it was the wrong house, and they broke down the door, kicked down the door, and then she sat up in her bed, and they fucking shot her dead. And it's like, why did the police do shit like that? Because they assume everyone is packing heat, right? Well, if they knew who had a gun and who didn't before they came in the door, maybe shit like that wouldn't happen. I don't know. Maybe it would be. I'm just trying to think of ways to. Because here's the thing. I know there's no way to completely outlaw weapons. It's not going to happen. So I'm just trying to think of harm reduction at this point, right? That might be a way that we can reduce the number of people getting killed. Maybe it would. Maybe it wouldn't be. I don't know. Maybe it's a dumb idea, but I don't know. Seems like it would be to me. So there's nothing wrong, as far as I can tell, with taking these types of measures. And that doesn't equate to banning guns completely, right? That's not the same thing, but that's the attack that you get from the right wing, is that, well, everyone who's on the left wants to ban all your guns. They want to take it away. Obama's gonna come and take away all your guns and put you into FEMA camps. How many times did you hear that shit? And it never fucking happened, right? And then immediately afterwards, now Biden's gonna take away all your guns, and that's not gonna fucking happen either, right? Yet they keep saying that over and over and over. So the fact is, if the LGBTQ community were to embrace the Second Amendment, it takes away that argument. It disarms that argument, right? Then they can't be like, oh, well, the leftists want to take your guns away anymore, right? It's like, no, obviously they fucking don't. Obviously, no, if we all embraced it, if we embraced the Second Amendment and just, advocated for, you can still continue to advocate for sensible gun control. It's all in the framing, right? Showing up at a drag queen storytime hour with an AR-15 kind of makes that message there. Kind of takes away that, takes away the ability for some fucking, MAGA chud to spread your picture around Facebook and claim shit about you that isn't true. And that kind of takes us to our last little segment tonight. There is a video that Tucker Carlson put out that I want to talk about. Let's read a few more comments here. Gaped Crusader, personally I think needed a driver's license as an exercise in the petty tyranny regarding cars the government loves. Obviously something that allows freedom of movement like a car is going to be heavy restricted and surveilled. Well, here's the thing about that, right? You do have freedom of movement, right? But why do they require people to register their cars? Why does the government, well, first off, why does the government require a driver's license, right? Because it's in the public interest to make sure that people know how to drive safely, right? And the reason why it's in the public interest for that is because 50,000 people a year die from auto accidents. That's why, right? Now, when one person dies from something in the country, if only one person in the country died of a car accident, then it wouldn't be that big of a deal. The government would not really have a reason to step in because it only happened to one guy, right? But when 50,000 people a year, on average, are biting the dust because morons out there don't know how to fucking drive the speed limit, right? Then yes, they need to step in, because that's where the mandate comes in. That's where the mandate for, public safety. The government has a responsibility for public safety, right? They do. That's why you have shit like seatbelts. That's why there's laws saying that you have to wear a helmet. I mean, well, in California at least, I know other states don't have helmet laws. That's why there's laws saying that you're not allowed to sell Twinkies with fucking, poison in them. You know, that you have to have basic food standards. For example, if you sell foods, that there has to be beef inspectors at slaughterhouses, things like that. Right. I'm taking a break. I should be drawing here, but my hand hurts, so I'm going to take a break from drawing. But we'll draw in a minute. That's why these things are there. It's because the government has an interest in keeping people alive. Provide for the general welfare. It's right there in the Constitution, right? Well, the general welfare means making sure people don't get fucking run over every 5 minutes. And the other thing is that you can't have a functioning society if if every road is a death trap. It's just, you know, you should be able to walk outside and not have to worry about being run over. You should be able to drive on the street and trust that other people know what they're doing enough that they won't purposely, or that they're not so incompetent that they'll fucking crash into you. Like, you should trust that when there's a red light, the guy coming from the other side will stop. Right? Or that a person knows what a stop sign is, or like somebody knows how to stay within the fucking lanes on the road, or whatever. Or, and it's already bad enough as it is. It's like everybody drives like a maniac already. People, I don't know about wherever you live, Gaped Crusader, but where I live in Los Angeles. The speed limit is just a suggestion to people in Los Angeles. That's just the suggested speed. No one ever actually drives that speed, right? And I'm pretty sure it's like that wherever you live too. So imagine if we required absolutely no type of test at all to drive a car. Imagine it was just like, okay, you're 16, go ahead. Or not even 16. Let's say as soon as you're just old enough to like drive a car. Some kids are tall enough when they're 10. Imagine a 10-year-old driving around in a car. Just all the fucking ridiculous shenanigans that can happen. It's like, well, no. So you want to have people pass at least a basic course, a driver's ed and a driver's training course. At least they know how to drive the car. They know what the rules of the road are. You're reasonably confident that you can cross the street without a maniac going 900 miles an hour fucking like liquefying you and shit when he because he's too busy like fucking texting while he's driving or some shit and running you over. I don't see why that same logic shouldn't apply to guns. I mean, don't you want people that know how to handle a gun to own guns, to make sure that they don't accidentally shoot themselves? The highest number of fatalities from firearms is actually from suicide. It's not from people shooting each other. The second highest number of fatalities is from accidents. That's how it goes. It's suicide first, then accidents, then actual murder, right? From gun fatalities. So that means more people kill themselves by accident, or they shoot someone else by accident. How does that usually happen? Usually when the gun's loaded and they think it's not loaded, and they're fucking around with it. They're playing with it. There's a round in the chamber. They think it's gone, and they're just screwing around in the house, and they accidentally shoot someone in the head or whatever. That's what's happening. Well, if we required basic gun safety courses, that would reduce that a lot, don't you think? I mean, that's where I'm at. My stance with gun control now is harm reduction. That's my stance. How it's the same way that you can't stop people from doing drugs, right? So you should make it as safe and clean as possible so that people don't OD or people don't die from drugs. You should do the same thing with guns. You can't stop people from owning guns. You can't stop people from buying them, from owning them, right? So we should be, in my opinion, we should make it as safe as possible. Same kind of thing. So I don't know. That's just my opinion. It's like, I know that shit'll never happen either. We will never get a law on the national level ever requiring a gun safety course. It's just not going to happen. I could see it happening at a state level. So. Hello folks, if you like what I do and you want to support the channel, please consider buying something from my Etsy shop, supporting me on Patreon, liking and subscribing, and checking me out across my social media links listed below. Thank you all so much, and see you next time.